Series, and today we'll be talking about resident technology packages. What are they? How can you build them? And what are some winning strategies to market them? Please note, attendee microphones have been muted. We will have Q&A at the end, and if you have any issues, use the Q&A feature and a moderator will assist you. Just to recap, who am I? I'm Ryan Galley. I'm the CEO of Icon. We are the leading communication and engagement platform for senior living and senior care providers in the US and Canada. As a recap, this is part of our monthly series. We do one talk per month. We started off the year talking about the 3 key senior living trends to keep an eye on in 2023. And as part of that, we briefly mentioned how, given cost inflation, there's going to be a lot of interest among providers in raising rates, and how can you actually do that while not getting a negative reaction from your residents. And one option we talked about was the idea of these resident technology packages. And so we got some interest in learning more about that. And so that was kind of the impetus for today's talk. And then just a couple other recaps. Last month, we talked about membership day programs and best practices for implementing that. Those recordings are both online if you want to watch them in your free time. And then coming up next month, we're going to talk about a lot of the first ones have been focused on kind of revenue related activities that communities can engage in. The next one's going to be more around the cost saving side and how you can consolidate and streamline your technology stack to reduce your spending and actually make the lives of your staff a lot easier and reduce risk and improve compliance. So stay tuned for that next month. But today let's talk about resident technology packages. We'll go through quickly what exactly they are. I think they're somewhat self-explanatory, but there's some nuance. We'll talk about the benefits of offering these kinds of packages, some of the pitfalls that we've seen when communities offer packages like this. We'll talk about whether they're offering them as a good fit for the community. And then we'll walk through some of the steps on how you can actually launch your own program and a few tips for successfully doing so. So with that, let me just quickly kick off with talking about what exactly these packages are. So these tech packages can be directed at the residents themselves or family members of the residents within the community. There's a full spectrum of offerings at probably the most basic end. And oftentimes you see this included in rent in this day and age, but high-speed Wi-Fi internet access is something that you could separately charge for. We'll talk about pricing models later. And we have a partner who helps communities actually manage Wi-Fi based programs like this. Moving along the spectrum, device as a service is another type of technology offering communities can offer. So device as a service is, if a senior might not own their own iPad or other device, they could kind of rent it from the community on a month-by-month basis. And there's some you can either manage this program yourself, or there's some tech IT companies that will actually manage these programs on your behalf. Other types of offerings, kind of premium entertainment systems, premium software solutions. So it could be, special application for family members to communicate with staff. Maybe you might give that away as part of the rent, or you might charge separately for that. Gated content offerings. If you use a platform like Icon, in the community hub, residents, or even on the in-room TVs, residents can access various content, whether it's workout classes, different music offerings, spiritual music, whatever it is. You can either have an all-inclusive package where you kind of give that content away for free, or there's some communities we know that actually will gate and call it, somewhat premium content that can be purchased separately. Moving further along, we have smart home technology. This is, at this day and age, can be quite sophisticated. Think everything from like the Amazon Alexas to smart speakers or Echo Shows, smart displays, to things like automatic lights and some of these monitoring devices. There's a lot of stuff around fall detection or behavior monitoring. We have a partner called Casper. They have a device that can monitor everything from room temperature to how many times someone's getting out of bed, and that information can be shared with your care provider or family directly. And then other wearables, although we haven't seen, just from our experience, wearables being that successful for whatever reason, hypothesize, but seniors have not, at least in our experience, taken to the wearables, and so we just haven't seen the pickup there. But all these other ones we've seen work really well in communities. As I alluded to, there's various pricing models that we've seen work. The easiest one to maintain is just everything's included in rent, and it's just part of rent. But as you'll see, we'll talk about why, in some cases you might not necessarily want to do that, or what are the benefits and cons of doing it that way. Other approaches are just a one-time fee. So maybe it's, if they want to get something custom installed in their room, one-time fee to do that, and you pass it through. The most common approach is this, either it's a monthly subscription or it's an additional charge of their rent, and they pay by month. And there, as I mentioned, there's a partner we have on the internet side who will actually share some of the cable internet revenue with you as a provider. And finally, although less common, we haven't seen it used very often, kind of a pay-as-you-go consumption-based model. This is kind of the idea of say you were using 5G and you didn't have unlimited data usage, and maybe you have them pay on the amount of data they use. Less common, very hard to actually implement and monitor, but I thought we'd just include it just to be comprehensive. But really the most common you see is it's either included in rents or it's an upcharge, and typically offered at move-in. You might have a card with the options of tech that can be provided. So those are the most common that we've seen. So why actually offer these packages? What are the benefits? So I'm going to start with the third point here, which is this idea of customer segmentation and value. This is really 2 points in one. I mean, the first one is without getting into the detail of the economics and reservation prices, but certain people have different willingness to spend on different items. And so if you include it in the rent, you're technically making, to be able to pay for that technology, you're making rent more expensive on average for everybody. But it's possible that either the given senior doesn't have interest or doesn't value the technology that you're offering. And so if they're price sensitive, you might have priced them out by increasing the rent for something that they don't think they really need. And it also gets to value. Sometimes when you explicitly call out the line item, the consumer values it more, and both in terms of if it's something that they want to pay for, they value it, or if it's something that they don't value, they explicitly, sometimes if you feel like you're paying for something you're not using, it can have that kind of negative value impact. And so there's a really good benefit in terms of segmentation of the customer base and the ability to extract the correct reservation price from each consumer. The fourth point here, the other obvious benefit is, it could be additional revenue stream for your community. Going back to the first talk we did on senior living trends, we talked about how do you raise or increase revenue to offset some of this cost inflation that we're seeing. This is one way you can do that. Whether it's, if it's a community where you think there's going to be high adoption, you include it in the rental rate, and you're able to demonstrate we're providing this technology, we're creating this additional value. This is why we're raising your rents. Or if it's on a subscription per person basis, you can actually have the resident opt in to paying more, and so you're not forcing them to do so. But oftentimes, if you mark this correctly, and we'll talk about that near the end, it's a great approach to actually have your resident or consumer spend more with you without forcing them to do so. And so it's a more delicate way to increase revenue, but a great approach, given we know that margins are being squeezed quite a bit right now, just given wages going up and up and up. Finally, as I mentioned, offering technology in general can improve the resident and family experience. If there's certain families that I think there's an expectation or there's a desire that they want a certain level of technology, especially among the millennial adult children generation. And so maybe you're not ready to offer it to everybody in your community, but this is a way at least you can service those consumers' needs. And along those lines, it could be a potential competitive advantage if your community's offering these packages relative to other communities in the area that might not be. So pitfalls. These are kind of what to avoid when building out a package. There is a certain complexity in managing and marketing these programs, as we'll talk about. If it's not marketed appropriately, it's going to fall flat. If you don't have staff buy-in, it's going to fall flat, and we'll talk about that in the kind of implementation approach slide. Another thing to keep in mind is there are certain applications or certain technology where the value of that technology requires widespread usage. So let me, a good example is kind of social technology. So this is stuff like, in our platform, for instance, you can use Icon, or the residents can use Icon to create groups themselves, like interest groups, and then they can invite other residents to join those interest groups. Obviously, if only a few people are on the platform, the value to the resident creating this group just isn't going to be as great. And so there's certain technology where you want widespread usage, and so it's not the best fit for the kind of a la carte approach. You kind of want it included. Same with affordability versus including in rent. This is the idea of you don't want the residents to think you're nickel and diming them, and so the way you really got to price this appropriately, and be cognizant of the messaging in doing so. Same with resident family expectations. There's certain technology, depending on the market, geographic market you're in, there's certain technology that I think residents and families expect that you're offering, and they expect that it's going to be included in their rent. And so those are ones where you probably shouldn't charge more for, where there is that, might be that feeling of nickel and diming. And so that's something to be aware of as well. And that's something you can do if you do a market study, or you kind of do some mystery shopping, can figure out what exactly your competitors are doing to make sure you don't have any missteps there. But basic engagement technology, kind of the fundamentals of it, I think, are expected in a lot of communities and some of the major markets these days. All right, so is a tech package a good fit for your community? Firstly, this program needs to, I say this, I think, with everything we talk about, but any program needs to be consistent with your stated business mission. You also need to make sure you have the appropriate infrastructure. So that could be, do you have the right system to be able to bill for something like this? Or to track, if you're doing device as a service, you have a system to track the devices you went out. And then do you have a team internally? I mean, there'll be support requests for assistance that come in. Do you have the team to support that? So the third point, have you successfully rolled out some foundational technology? What we've found for these programs to work well is there should be some base level of tech that's included in the rent that you've rolled out, you've done it well, and you've got high adoption. This way, your seniors are already primed and comfortable with using this kind of tech. The reason that's important is because as soon as you start charging for additional tech services, there's going to be more of a hesitancy among the seniors who already were tech resistant to spend more money on something that they didn't think they needed. And so getting the initial buy-in, getting everyone using some basic tech, getting those non-believers into the mix, the ones who are tech resistant, getting them using the platforms, the foundational platforms like an engagement platform or social platform like Icon is probably the way you go. And then you can do these add-ons, maybe the Amazon Alexa devices you charge separately for, or the fall detection devices, whatever it is, and the more bells and whistles. But getting them more comfortable with foundational tech is a good idea. The next point here, maybe we make this for a future part of the series, but this is one we do this talk live, talking about how you can successfully implement and get high levels of adoption with tech. And one thing we always encourage is for you to actually develop and launch your own resident tech committee. There's a ton of reasons why this really helps adoption, but one of the biggest ones is you now have a small pocket of buy-in among potentially influential residents if you set this up correctly. And then you also have basically free tech and implementation support with these individuals who can help troubleshoot, implement the rest of the residents in the community. So we always recommend that you develop one of these committees, and we provide some instruction on how to do so. And then the final one is, make sure you have the adequate Wi-Fi to support the different tech. Some Wi-Fi or some tech doesn't require that strong connection, but something like Amazon Alexa Show will probably require a strong connection to run. And again, we do have a couple of partners we recommend if you do need to do any upgrades there. Sometimes it can be a lot more affordable than you actually expect. So talked about the benefits, talked about why these make sense for you, why they might not make sense, on the pitfalls. What are the basic steps at a high level that you need to kind of go through if you're going to launch a program? So step one, identify your project team. this is, you typically want champions, some of these people internally who are going to really spearhead this initiative. You do want it to be somewhat cross-functional. If you think about tech packages, it's going to hit IT, it might hit CNAs on the ground. It's going to hit multiple departments, and so you kind of want representation from each group. Next, you're going to want to conduct a needs assessment to understand what technology you think would be successfully adopted. I always think this step's super important. Sometimes the results will actually surprise you. You might think, my community is not ready for something like this, and then you do a survey where you survey the local market, and you find out actually, wow, the demand's a lot higher than we expected. So see what your residents need, see what the local market, see what other communities in your area are doing to figure out what type of technology you think would be successful. And typically we do recommend, again, starting small with a few offerings, and if it is working well, you can expand the package offerings, and maybe you have different tiers, different options. Step 3, you need to establish internal systems and operations. Again, this is things like, how are you going to track billing? How are you going to manage devices? Who's going to do troubleshooting support? Seem to have these things mapped out ahead of time before you launch. Or is deciding on what your packages actually look like. Again, starting with a base package that's including rent, like a community hub product, like Icon is a good start, and then you could do for the add-ons, things like Amazon Alexa devices, smart home technology that integrates with this base platform. This way you get the initial adoption, and then it's kind of a gateway to some of these other fancier devices. And so you could start with a simple add-on package at a certain monthly rate, or you can start with a few different options, whatever it is. And oftentimes vendors will work with you where you're only paying the cost associated with the tech for these packages if the residents have actually purchased the packages themselves. So it's kind of like almost like a revenue share model in a sense, but this way you're pretty much de-risked on the cost side of things, other than your internal costs to kind of or staff time to set this up. 5, develop that pricing model again, including in rent, you're charging a separate fee. Is there a one-time fee? 6, again, with any rollout or any project for that matter, I always say you got to state your goals and objectives up front. So is that a revenue goal? Is that a satisfaction goal? Whatever it is, do a baseline analysis when you do your needs assessment. Understand what your objectives are. Set realistic objectives. And so this way you can actually monitor whether what you're doing is successful and worth the time. 7, and this could be a slide in and of itself, is you got to develop that marketing and promotion plan. You don't want this to fall flat. You're going to get people excited about the tech. If it's something that you're offering at move-in, we're kind of doing an a la carte approach. Your salespeople need to be enabled on how to sell and offer these packages. And so this is, maybe we can do a whole talk if there's interest on this point in and of itself, but this is where the meat is, and where a lot of programs either fail or really succeed. Finally, 8, launch your program, and then 9, always you want to gather feedback from the residents, from your staff, iterate based on what you hear. Typically, we find the best learnings during this stage, and a few times projects are perfectly successful off the get-go. There's always some iteration, so it's really important you do this kind of constant feedback gathering. So I ran through that pretty quick. I just wanted to leave before we open up to questions with some tips that we think kind of we've seen work well for communities that have been successful. So first one is consider the accessibility and tech fluency of your community. When offering packages or even a baseline tech included in the rent, you want to offer multiple kinds of technologies, multiple platforms, that is, to ensure that you're adequately addressing the needs of your residents or unique population. So what I mean by that is, maybe for an active senior, an iPhone app is the way that they want to engage with you. But maybe for a visually impaired senior, that's not going to work. For the visually impaired, maybe you do need some voice-enabled device that they can use to engage with. Maybe for some really older residents, they like to be engaged using automated phone calls, for example. There's technology, or even in-room TV is another great example. They want to be engaged that way because that's what they're more comfortable with. Again, you want to offer multiple tech to make sure that you're addressing the different or unique needs of your population. That's going to vary, obviously, community to community. Second point, which I think I've hit over the head quite a bit, which is this: you need some baseline tech adoption before you start trying to do these add-ons. Using multiple price points is a great way to start as you try to refine your pricing. And kind of this way do better segmentation, and then also this way you're not deciding on one price where you could be way off. You have multiple shots on goal with price points for different levels of things. And then again, start small. Don't try to offer absolutely everything out of the gate. Maybe it is some smart devices, or some of these really crazy detection monitoring sensors that you can do these days. Maybe it's that, but kind of, if you want to do it small, then you can always add to it. You can always add more as you go. So finally, the shameless plug before open questions. We're Icon. We're a leading communication engagement platform. We're now in over 2,000 communities in the U.S. and Canada, and we do everything from boosting family and resident satisfaction to improving your staff's operational efficiencies and reducing costs. And if you're interested in learning more, feel free to reach out. But with that, I know we only got 2 minutes, but I will open the floor up to questions. These are great questions. I love this. So first question: Is there a best way to assess tech fluency of the community as a whole? And this one is interesting because where their current fluency isn't necessarily where it can be. And we've seen communities, I do this talk about Ohio Living, one of their communities, where they were able to get 90% adoption despite them doing surveys. So they're what they did, and this is what we've recommended in the past, is get a sense of how many of them actually have emails, for example. Are they using email actively? Typically, if they're using email actively, that means they're accessing it through an iPhone or a desktop device. And so that gives you a pretty good baseline most platforms, if you can use an email, you can use them. Interestingly, they did that, and they said, okay, 75% of our population has an email address. They were able to get to over 90% adoption. And that's because there was this bunch they thought just didn't want to use technology, and it was just that they hadn't really been taught and made comfortable with it. And that's maybe it's for another talk to go through it in more detail, but they used the Resident Tech Committee, worked super well. They did one-on-one training sessions, and then they did for how they phrased it, but they told the seniors, because they found that the seniors that weren't using tech were scared to break the platforms. And they said, you can't break it, try to break it, click wherever you can, just see what happens. And it worked really well. Where can we access recordings? Meredith's going to touch on, share that. Meredith, our head of marketing. And then last one, I know we're slightly over, try to get this quick. do you have a package available for residents to understand? Oh, that's great. That's a great question. The question was, do we have something for residents to understand all that Icon has to offer, and examples of how it can be used? Yes, we can share some stuff. That's probably for Meredith. We can talk offline, but we can send that around to all attendees possibly later today. So yes, we can get you stuff for sure.
I did answer the question in the chat, but if anyone's interested in the recordings of the videos that Ryan mentioned were part of the earlier offerings in this series, if you just go to goicon.com and click the resources tab, you'll see a videos page, and they're at the bottom of that page. But it's also just goicon.com/videos.
Great. I know we're slightly over. I really appreciate everyone. I know I talked a mile a minute here. If there are any questions, feel free to email me directly at ryan@goicon.com. Always happy to answer any questions or chat if that's preferred. But again, thank you so much. Next month, we'll be talking about tech consolidation and cost savings. Thank you, everyone.